What if our worst catastrophe is not pandemic threat or climate change, but the loss of meaning altogether? Nietzsche cautioned us, by destroying the things we share in common, we'd create a world of technological wonder, but spiritual wasteland. In this video, discover how his misunderstood "God is dead" phrase has surprising solutions for rediscovering real purpose in our broken world. In addition to the slogan, "God is dead," Nietzsche properly diagnosed our modern-day hollowness with clinical precision. This video boils his misunderstood philosophy into practical approaches to getting about in our spiritually starved times. You'll learn how to identify the hidden crisis of meaning beneath our technological niceties and how to build authentic purpose when conventional moorings have dissolved. This is not abstract theory. It's a guide to finding solid ground when everything seems to be shifting under your feet. I remember sitting in a cafe one afternoon, reading one of the wildest books ever, The Gay Science by Friedrich Nietzsche. That's when I re-encountered the phrase I had heard 1,000 times, but never really heard. God is dead. 3 words. Simple. Director. And yet they hit me like a whisper that echoes for miles. Everyone uses the phrase these days, but seeing it in that book made me wonder if we've been missing the warning hidden in those words. What if Nietzsche wasn't just making a statement, but ringing an alarm bell that's still tolling for us today? Let's take a step back and look at what Nietzsche was getting at. Because God is dead wasn't some smug atheist declaration. It was more like someone pointing at the heart of our modern world and saying, "Hey, we've lost something important and we need to talk about it." Nietzsche wasn't just throwing around a catchy slogan to get attention. He wasn't shouting from the rooftops about the victory of reason or using "God is dead" as a mic drop moment for atheism. Instead, it was like he was standing in the middle of a world that had just lost something huge, something we didn't even realize we depended on. And he was saying, "Do you see what's missing? We need to recognize this, and we need to figure out what comes next." It's like when you've just lost something or someone you cared about, you wouldn't rush to replace them immediately, right? You would take a moment to sit with the loss, to feel it, to understand what's gone. That's the emotional space Nietzsche was coming from. When he said, "God is dead," he wasn't celebrating anything. He was quietly pointing out that we had let something important slip away, and no one seemed to notice or understand the weight of it. But where was all of this coming from? When Nietzsche wrote those words in The Gay Science, he wasn't dropping some groundbreaking bombshell. He wasn't revealing something the world had never heard before. The truth is, the decline of religious authority had been unfolding for a long time. It was more like the last note in a song that had been playing for centuries. By then, the scientific revolution had already stepped in and started pulling at the threads of how people understood the universe. It challenged the old ways of thinking, slowly tugging at the roots of the biblical worldview. The idea that the world was divinely ordered began to feel a little shaky. Then came the Enlightenment, and with it, a full-on celebration of human reason. People started putting logic and intellect on a pedestal. Faith and tradition took a back seat while the spotlight shifted to things you could prove, measure, and understand. And by the time the 1800s rolled around, Darwin's theory of evolution landed with another hard blow. It did not just question where humans came from. It chipped away at the whole sacred picture. The idea that life was guided by a higher power took another hit, and that crack in the sacred mirror grew wider. So no, Nietzsche was not sounding the alarm on something brand new. He was pointing out what had already happened and wondering why no one was paying attention. Essentially, atheism was not exactly shocking anymore. By the time Nietzsche was writing, it had already settled into the background of intellectual life. It was like an old piece of furniture in the room, something people had gotten used to seeing, something that no longer sparked surprise. What shocked Nietzsche was not that people had stopped believing in God. It was that they seemed completely unfazed by what that loss truly meant. The silence, The indifference, the casual shrug in the face of such a massive shift, was what disturbed him. It was not just about belief fading away. It was about the absence of any real reaction to that fading. Nobody was stopping to ask the hard questions. Nobody seemed concerned about what would replace the meaning, the structure, or the sense of direction that belief once gave. The space left behind was huge, but hardly anyone was talking about how to fill it. By the way, when Nietzsche said God, he was not just talking about some bearded figure sitting in the sky watching over everything. He was pointing to something much bigger. He was talking about the entire framework that used to give the world its shape. The deep belief in absolute truth, in moral rules that applied to everyone, in a kind of cosmic structure that helped people make sense of their lives and choices. God, in this wider and deeper sense, was not just a religious symbol. He was the very ground we stood on, the invisible support system that gave life meaning, direction, and coherence. And then, almost quietly, that ground vanished. So when Nietzsche said God was dead, he was not just making a statement, he was making an accusation. He was saying that we had killed him. And even more unsettling, we were all just going about our lives, pretending like nothing had happened, like we had not just lost the very thing that held everything together. Let's go through the pages of his book now. Nietzsche helped paint this picture vividly through a parable in the gay science that captures the heart of the crisis with chilling clarity. In the story, he introduces a figure known only as the madman. It is not night, not the dark hours where you might expect someone searching for God. It is early morning, broad daylight, when everything should be clear and visible. Yet here comes this madman, charging into the bustling marketplace with a lantern in his hand. A lantern in daylight. Already, something feels off. He is not quiet about it either. He is shouting at the top of his lungs, "I seek God, I seek God." His cry cuts through the noise of everyday life, through the casual chatter, the buying and selling. But no one takes him seriously. To them, he is just raving, just another crazy man in the crowd. The people in the marketplace, they're not religious, they're not faithful parishioners clutching rosaries. They're already unbelievers, skeptics, rationalists, the kind of people who would probably binge science podcasts today. And they laugh at him, they jeer. Did God get lost? They mock. Is he hiding? Did he emigrate? Then comes the turn. The madman silences the crowd, stares them down, and declares, "God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him." Sure, it sounds theatrical. A wild man with a lantern in broad daylight, shouting about God in the middle of a marketplace. But behind all the drama, there is something devastatingly precise in what he says. The madman isn't talking to devout believers or churchgoers. His message is not for those still clutching to faith. He is speaking directly to the skeptics, the rational minds, the people who believe they have moved beyond the need for God, the ones who think they have matured past religion. Nietzsche's point here is sharp. Letting go of belief in God might feel like a bold step forward. It might feel like freedom. But that is the easy part. The real challenge begins after the belief is gone. What do you do with the emptiness it leaves behind? What do you build in its place? That is the harder question, and the one most people avoid. Because when we killed God, it wasn't just about rejecting a figure in the clouds or stepping away from organized religion. It went much deeper than that. We were turning our backs on something far more profound. We were cutting ourselves off from the source that once gave our lives structure, purpose, and direction. This wasn't just about belief. It was about the framework that held our world together. We dismantled the moral compass that had guided human behavior for centuries. The inner voice that whispered right from wrong suddenly lost its authority. We removed the metaphysical anchor that had kept us grounded through storms of doubt, and we tore apart the cosmic storyline that had always given us a place in the universe, A story that told us who we were, why we were here, and what it all meant. We didn't just stop going to church or tuning out sermons. We did something far more dramatic. We burned the maps, the ones that used to show us where we came from and where we were going. And with those maps gone, we found ourselves wandering, unguided, adrift. In case you haven't figured it out yet, here's what makes it truly haunting. No one seemed to react. There was no collective pause, no gasp, no reckoning. The world just kept turning. People woke up, went to work, scrolled through the news, made dinner, binged shows, as if nothing had shifted, as if everything was still fine. But underneath all that normalcy, something had changed, something huge. Nietzsche saw it. He saw what others didn't want to face, that with the death of God, a quiet darkness had begun to creep in, a slow, unsettling wave of nihilism, the belief that nothing matters, that there is no grand plan, no ultimate meaning, just a spinning rock floating in a cold, indifferent universe. And this wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't show up as chaos in the streets. It was subtle, quiet. It showed up in that nagging sense of emptiness, in the loss of passion, in the slow fading of hope. In this way, life began to feel like a performance without a script, just chaos wearing a temporary mask of order. Nietzsche didn't just predict this, he warned us. And the scariest part is how accurate that warning still feels today. He described this with almost prophetic clarity. Without God, he said, we are like planets that have slipped their orbit, just floating, drifting through space, no longer bound by the forces that once kept us in place, directionless, aimless. We continue to talk about all these concepts of justice, truth, and love, but the words feel hollow. We use them like we're playing a part in some old tired script, but there's nothing solid behind them. They're just echoes of their former selves, recited without the belief, the depth, or the grounding they once had. The scaffolding that used to support these ideas is gone. There's no firm base, no structure to hold them up anymore. That's where we are now, treading water in a world that's lost its anchor. And you know what? That hits hard. When you look around today, you can see it everywhere. You see it in the way politics has turned into this cynically driven spectacle. Leaders don't seem to stand for anything deeper than personal gain, and citizens have become disillusioned, unsure of who or what to trust. The conversations have shifted from meaningful debate to pointless bickering. It's as if nobody knows what truth is anymore, just a blur of opinions, spin, and sound bites. This brings us to moral confusion. This problem has become so evident in our digital age. On the internet, everyone has a voice, and every voice claims to know what's right. Yet, when we look at it all, the lines between right and wrong seem to blur more every day. Everyone's chasing different truths, constructing their moralities, and it's hard to know who or what to believe anymore. We try to make sense of it, to find some kind of moral compass, but it often feels like we're just going in circles. Think about it. Have you ever found yourself questioning what's truly right or wrong, wondering which path to follow when everyone else seems to have their take on things? And in the midst of all this, there's a constant, restless search for identity and belonging. People are endlessly trying to define who they are and where they fit in, especially in this hyper-connected, fragmented world. But in the process, many end up more confused than ever, pulled in 100 directions by external expectations and influences. It's like we're drowning in endless options, endless opinions, and an overload of data, yet but still starving for meaning. We're surrounded by more information than we've ever had before, yet it feels like we know less and less about who we are or what we're doing here. The more we try to fill the void with knowledge, achievement, with stuff, the emptier we seem to get. That feeling of emptiness Nietzsche talked about is real, and it's everywhere now. We're all trying to find something that will make us feel grounded again. But with the scaffolding gone, it's hard to know where to start. And here is the twist. Nietzsche did not believe science could save us. Did he admire it? Sure. He respected its methods, its discipline, and its ability to break things down and explain them in ways that religion never could. But he also saw the danger. He warned that science, too, could become just another belief system, another idol we put on a pedestal, another god, only this time wearing a lab coat and holding a microscope. Because at the end of the day, even science is not as neutral or detached as we like to think. It still rests on assumptions. It still depends on a kind of faith. Faith in the idea that the universe can be understood, faith in reason, faith in logic. We trust that the world operates in consistent patterns. We assume that our senses and instruments give us an accurate picture of reality. We believe in the possibility of objectivity, even though human beings are anything but objective. Nietzsche saw this. He was not against science, but he was skeptical of how easily people could trade one certainty for another. He knew that if we simply replaced God with science, without doing the deeper work of rethinking our values, we were just swapping robes. We were bowing to a new authority, without truly understanding what it meant to live without the old one. So when he spoke of science, it was not with blind praise or blind condemnation. It was with caution. Because even the cold clarity of data can become a kind of dogma if we are not careful. Even the microscope can become a symbol of misplaced faith. You see, when people start treating science like a new religion, Nietzsche says they have not broken free. They have not escaped the old trap at all. They have just given it a fresh name and a modern outfit. The craving is still there. The deep urge for certainty, for structure, for some kind of ultimate truth to hold on to, is very much present. It is the same longing that once made people cling to religion. Only now, it is wrapped in statistics and scientific jargon, and Nietzsche thought that could be just as dangerous. Because the danger was never just in believing in God. The danger was in the need to believe in something so absolute, so unshakable, that it stops you from questioning, from thinking for yourself. So when people swap out God for science, but still chase after the same kind of rigid certainty, they are not being bold or free-thinking. They are just repeating the same pattern. Only this time, the cathedral is a laboratory, and the sermons are research papers. And Nietzsche is saying, do not be fooled. The name has changed, but the instinct remains the same. Interestingly, I felt that void Nietzsche talked about. Maybe you have too. That weird, empty feeling that creeps in late at night, when the distractions quiet down, when the notifications stop, and suddenly you're left alone with your thoughts. You wonder what any of it means. The deadlines, the arguments, the carefully curated online persona, the endless scroll. I remember a season in my life where everything felt weightless, not light but hollow, like I was just going through motions that didn't lead anywhere. I wasn't depressed exactly, I was just there. Nothing felt solid. I tried filling the space with productivity, with self-improvement, with all the things the culture says should make you feel whole. But it was like pouring water into a bottomless pit. That's when Nietzsche's words came back to me. God is dead, and we have killed him. And I realized that this wasn't just a critique of history or religion. It was a description of my inner life, of our collective condition. The truth is, we still need meaning. That hunger has not gone away. We still crave purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, something that ties all the chaos together. But now, without a shared foundation, we are left to piece it all together on our own. And sure, that kind of freedom can be exciting, but let us be honest, it can also be completely exhausting. It is like trying to build a house in mid-air. There is no solid ground beneath you, no blueprint to follow. Every brick you place feels like it might fall. Every truth you reach for feels like it could be pulled away tomorrow. And sometimes that leaves you feeling like nothing is solid, like everything is just a temporary fix for something deeper. But here is the twist in Nietzsche's message. He was not writing all this to leave us in a pit of despair. He was not trying to say that life is meaningless and we should just give up. Quite the opposite. He wanted to jolt us awake, to shake us out of that passive state where we let old beliefs guide us just because they always have. He was saying that if those old truths are gone, then yes, it is scary. But it also means we are free now, terrifyingly free, free to invent new meaning, free to create purpose instead of waiting for someone else to hand it to us. And there is something strangely powerful about that, even if it feels like walking a tightrope in the dark. But we cannot do that by pretending the old truths never mattered. That would be dishonest. These beliefs shaped our history, our morals, and our sense of right and wrong. They gave us comfort, community, and a map for living. So before we can move forward, we have to grieve for them. We have to sit with what they meant, understand why they held so much power. Only then, with clear eyes and open hearts, can we begin to step into something new. And that brings us to the big question. Where does that leave us now? We are standing right at the edge of a new kind of world, one where the old certainties are no longer holding everything in place. The ground that used to feel so solid now feels like it is shifting beneath our feet. The scaffolding that supported belief, morality, and identity has fallen away, and what we are left with is this wide-open space where everything is up for debate, where nothing feels guaranteed. And for many, nothing feels sacred. It is a strange place to be, a little disorienting. But maybe, just maybe, it is the beginning of something honest, something real. But maybe that's not the end. Maybe it's the beginning. Nietzsche's warning was real, but so was his hope. He believed that from the ruins of the old world, a new kind of human could emerge. One who doesn't cling to inherited truths. One who doesn't pretend to know the ultimate answers, but one who dares to create, to live with courage, to embrace the chaos and dance. He called this new figure the Übermensch, not a superhero, but a spirit, a way of being, someone who turns despair into strength, who finds joy in the abyss, who says yes to life even when it doesn't make sense. And maybe that's what we're being called to now. Not to return to old beliefs, not to worship new idols, but to live with eyes wide open, to question, to wonder, to explore, to make meaning, not find it, to love, not because we're told to, but because we choose to. Because even if God is dead, the story isn't over. We're still here, still breathing, still asking questions, and maybe that's enough to begin again. And so here we are on the threshold of meaning, looking into that huge empty space Nietzsche described. The old maps no longer exist. The reassuring certainties are gone. But our story does not end there. Perhaps you too have known that emptiness, that strange hollowness when the hum stops and silence descends. That question which sighs, what does anything of this really mean? If that touched a chord, I'd like to hear. What small act of meaning-making will you make today? Not some perfect solution or grand gesture. One real step in the direction of making purpose a reality in your life. Comment below to share your answer. Your own journey might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.